someone who grew up being homeschooled, I want to give a personal story about how that has impacted me and some of the decisions that I have made as a result. For those who may not know, homeschooling is on the rise. In general, a lot more people are homeschooling than they have been in previous years. I will not say in previous generations, because homeschooling really has been done for the majority of history. Socialized schooling, public schooling has been a newer concept in the past 200 years, but before that, everyone was homeschooled and you learned what you needed to learn from your parents, and that's how you did it. But in recent years, homeschooling has been much more prevalent, and we're seeing a lot of pushback from some people who are very against homeschooling and the impact that it can have. And they're wondering, like, are these people going to make productive adults? Are these people going to have an impact on society? Like, how are these people going to be able to have social skills? Is homeschooling really what's better for them? Like, shouldn't they learn this information from a teacher who has gone to college, who has learned how to teach and educate better? And a lot of thoughts like this are happening in conversations within the homeschooling, public schooled realm. Now, first of all, I just want to start by giving a brief overview of my story. I was in 5th grade when my mom started homeschooling me and my siblings. And so my 2 youngest siblings have always been homeschooled. But me and my sister went to a private school for several years for me until I was in 4th grade. And so I have distinct memories of being in private school. And I remember having some people that I knew. They weren't really my friends, but they were acquaintances at the time, and them being homeschooled. And I remember distinctly this one girl who said she was going to be homeschooled this upcoming year, and she was a good deal older than me. And I remember her saying how she's always wanted to get ahead in her school so that way she can graduate early and just start her life, you know, like a lot of young people want to do. Maybe most don't, but you know, some young girls want to do. When I heard that, it was in a conversation that was just overheard. She said it to another girl who was her age. But when I heard that, I immediately was like, this is for me. I desperately want to be homeschooled. I'm sick and tired of being at school for 8 hours a day, coming home, doing schoolwork until bedtime. And really, that's how my days were. Between piano practicing and doing homework, I literally was doing homework in 4th grade until my bedtime. Now, granted, my bedtime was earlier than most people's are, because my dad is a nurse and he knows how much sleep like children actually need, and was allotting that to us accordingly. And so we really just had the weekends to invest in our own interests, and we were at school the rest of the time, or doing homework, or on the bus. I remember distinctly being at school trying to get like my homework done because we were in a class talking about something, and I remember sitting there and being like, I learned this, like I already remember this. I could do this so much faster than the teacher is teaching this. My favorite part about school, I remember, was those little tests that you take, like for multiplication or division for math, and they are timed. And those were my favorite because everyone finally would take the test at the same rate. And I was so thrilled. Stop. Don't forget to like this video and go ahead and subscribe if you enjoy listening to content like this. I talk about living an intentional life rooted in God's word. Because of a lot of these reasons and more, my mom really wanted to actually be able to spend a good chunk of time with her kids rather than sending us away for 8 or 9 hours of the day. So she started homeschooling us, and I was thrilled. Me and my sister had been begging to be homeschooled when we saw acquaintances that were being homeschooled. And like I said, once I heard that conversation from that girl, I sat there and I am like, I am going to be just like her. I want to be homeschooled, and I want to get finished with all my school early so that way I can graduate and live my life and get married and have my baby. From that point on, I was homeschooled. I didn't graduate high school early, but I was able to do many college courses early enough to cut off an entire year of my college education. So I went to school and college for 3 years rather than 4, and get those gen eds out of the way, because a lot of those gen eds are the same exact classes that you are taking in high school, and you just retake them again in college, and they think that that's completely necessary. And I'm like, okay, if people didn't get this the first time, like, why are we reteaching this? Like, maybe there's an issue with the way this is being taught. Anyway, I would say from an educational standpoint, homeschooling was a very good option. It actually incentivized me to learn. I think I enjoyed learning a lot more when I was independent at it, and that is my personality. I enjoy independent learning. And my mom obviously had constructs, and she had been a public school teacher for a couple years before I was born. And so because of that, she had some knowledge already in her belt and felt confident in her ability to be able to do this. And I know that some people struggle with that confidence, but generally if you've been homeschooled yourself, you become more confident because you know, like, okay, you don't have to know everything as the teacher. They give you teacher's manuals. You understand grading and how it works. By the time, you know, you've graduated, you're not just like, oh my goodness, what is this? What's going on? What is this whole homeschool world about? Because you've been there, you're there helping out your younger siblings maybe. From an educational standpoint, it really helped me to excel. It helped me to finish my work early. I was very motivated in my work, and I was very motivated by the grades that I would get, and my mom would obviously grade our stuff. It was very similar to normal school, where we had grades and everything and tests and the like. But people often wonder, okay, you're being homeschooled. Do you even have social skills? How did you get out? How did you talk with other students? And I think the interesting thing about this is, for me personally, I felt like I had a much more thriving social life after I was homeschooled as compared to before. And the reason for this being is, before I was homeschooled, I was just up till 4th grade. Like, we had no study halls in school where we could talk with friends. Like, maybe you had a half hour of recess that you could chat with people. But other than that half hour a day, and maybe a half hour for lunch, like maybe an hour a day type of deal, other than that hour a day, I really didn't not have a ton of social time because I was doing my homework once I got home. I didn't have time to spend it with friends. I didn't have time to do anything but homework and school. And like I said, maybe some dinner or something. When I was homeschooled, I was able to do my schoolwork at my own pace, and I was able to get ahead. Because of that, I then had the rest of the day to be able to socialize. Now, part of that time, a lot of it is you're just socializing with your family and with your siblings. But I will say that being homeschooled, I do credit it to having a greater bond with my sibling than I otherwise would have had I gone to 8 hours of public or private school every single day. Besides my siblings, I think it was a lot easier to get together with friends, especially friends who were also homeschooled, or to babysit, or we had a co-op that we went to every week. And yes, for the majority of the co-op, you were in classes or just whatever gen eds we were taking through it. So it might be art or music or gym. We were able to still, in between those times, like talk with people. And it was kind of like a church setting where, like, before you get to church, you chat with everyone, you say hi, you know, go talk with your friends. And that's how it kind of was at our co-op. Now, we also had church where we would go, and that was also a great way for us to be socialized. But we also, every single week or almost every week, would spend time with our extended family. So my grandparents and my aunt and uncle and their daughter, so my cousin. That allowed us to be able to learn how to have intergenerational communication. And I do think that because I was homeschooled, there were a lot more situations in which, you know, the old ladies from the church would get together and be quilting. And so me and my sister would go and help them out with that. Or something was happening during the day, and it was maybe older ladies or older couples. And we would go as homeschoolers and be involved in that. And so we learned how to have communication and conversation with people who were of all different ages and ranges. And so I do think that that was a more accurate representation of real life, of the real life conversations that you're going to have once you're an adult, rather than just with your fellow third graders and maybe your teacher. I think socialization from homeschooler to homeschooler is going to depend. Some homeschoolers are really introverted and they are fine with the fact that they don't have socialization with other people. And in my opinion, that's fine if that's how the family wants to raise them to be, as long as you are able and capable of understanding basic principles of your schooling and learn how to have good communication with others, even if you are naturally an introvert, because some people genuinely are much more introverted than others. Their communication is different. Like, we all are different personalities, and so we're going to have a bit of a different communication with others. But as long as there is some sort of independence that is being formed in these children's lives, I think homeschooling is a great opportunity to push people to actually go out of their comfort zone, talk with people who may not be their age, and socialize with people who are very different from them in some cases. Grandma is at a very different life stage than a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, but they are still able to have these in-depth conversations and just have a knowledge about how to approach interaction with people who may not be their age. I did an interesting poll on my Instagram, my personal Instagram at one point, and it was a little while ago that I did this. But for those of you who don't know, in general, people who homeschool, especially Christians who homeschool, in the time I was growing up, most especially, they generally have a very intentional view on life in general, and so they view children as a blessing. And so many homeschool families do have larger families than most. Now, a lot of them have, 3, 4, maybe 5 kids. I would say an average of the families that I knew personally, some of them were public schooled, some homeschooled. But if you were to put a conglomerate of them together, I would say between 3 to 5 kids was fairly average, maybe 3 to 6. In my opinion, that's a very normal size family, whereas I realize in our culture and probably in the public school, an average family would be more so in that 2 to 4 range. However, because of this, I would be willing to bet that how many kids and the circumstances that you've been around are going to impact the circumstances that you are going to want to raise your own kids in. I did have such a positive homeschool experience, and I absolutely do want that for my children. And I think that that definitely has impacted me in a great way. But I know of some other people who had a very negative homeschool experience, just really a negative family life in general, where that has really skewed their perception and their view on homeschooling and kind of the intentional view that maybe their parents tried to be a part of, but perhaps weren't as great at. I created this spreadsheet off of the Instagram polls that I had done, and I looked at how many kids people wanted and then whether they were public schooled, homeschooled, or private schooled. Maybe this won't be interesting to you, but I found this very interesting at the time. 0 kids, there was 1 public schooler who said that they wanted 0. 1 to 2 kids was primarily dominated. There was 10 total people in that category. Public schoolers, 6 of them wanted 1 to 2. 2 of them were unknown, and 2 of them were private schooled. Of people who wanted 3 to 4 children, 9 of them were homeschoolers, 9 of them were public schoolers, and 2 of them were private schooled. So 3 to 4 was kind of like that sweet point where there was 20 people who, of that polling group, 20 of those people wanted 3 to 4 children. And I would say, once again, many of the people who follow me are Christians, and so they do come from a also biblical perspective of looking at children as blessings. And so I kind of expected that there would be a good portion of people in that 3 to 4 category, and there absolutely was. Now, in the 5+ category, there were 13 total people in that category. Mind you, there were more in the 5+ category than there were in the 1 to 2 category. So in the 5+, 11 homeschoolers, 11 of the 13 were homeschoolers who said they wanted 5+ children. 1 was a public schooler, and 1 was unknown. I think that they were either homeschooled or private schooled, though. And interestingly enough, though, besides the unknown person, there was 0 private schoolers who wanted 5+. And actually, the majority of the people who were private schoolers, there wasn't many private schoolers in general, just 4 that answered. But half of them were in the 1 to 2 and half of them were in the 3 to 4, which I thought was very interesting. There were 44 total people who responded. 2% voted for 0. That was just 1 person. 23% voted for 1 to 2. 45%, like I said, that biggest chunk was voting for 3 to 4. And 30%, there were still 30% of people voting for 5+ children. That's what they desired in the amount of kids that they had. Now, I will say, these are numbers that people desired. These are people who, like I said, they know me personally, generally speaking, and they are Christians. And so they do have this view that children are blessings, and they also genuinely probably have been around people of different ages a little bit more than maybe others in public school have, just because at church you're going to be around people of different ages than you. And so even if they were public schoolers or private schoolers, they were probably around children a little bit more than unchurched counterparts. I just thought that it was so interesting that there were no homeschoolers who wanted 0 or 1 to 2 children. All homeschoolers that answered at least wanted 3+ children. And like I said, in the 5+ category, it was 85% of that category was homeschoolers, which I thought was just so interesting. And you may not be a super big statistics person. I know some people are just not into the statistics at all. But for me, I find this so interesting. And like I said, it's with people that I knew. So if you took a general population count, it would be very different. Way more people would be public schooled. I think here we had 20 total homeschoolers and 17 public schoolers who answered. So we had a little bit more homeschoolers who answered than public schoolers. So because of that, that might, throw it off or whatever. But obviously in the real world, we would probably not get these statistics, but this is just kind of like the people that I knew. And it's interesting to me how that had an impact. And it really looks like statistically speaking, it looks like your schooling really does have an impact. And the culture that you were growing up in has an impact on, like I said, the number of children that you wanted. Homeschoolers do tend to have more children. It's just they tend to have more. And I think that people who were homeschooled were in this environment where there was many children. And because of that, I do think that has an impact on the number of children that they then desire. So I think that that's an interesting impact that homeschooling can have. Obviously, that's just my personal analyzations. I'm sure that you could do more studies about that, but I just do think it's so interesting. And I think that part of the reason that I just seek to live a very intentional life is because many of the people that were around me and supporting me and surrounding me were people who also desired to live the same intentional life, put intentionality into their children, put intentionality into their schooling choice, And because of that, they had intentionality in many other aspects of their life as well. I don't know if you were able to gain anything from this, but I hope that truly, if you are anti-homeschooling and you listen to this, maybe you're gonna be even more anti-homeschooling. You're like, oh my goodness, these people cannot exist after this conversation. I hope not. But I do hope that you understand that it definitely did have an impact on me, and I do think just the intentionality and the love of my parents and just seeing how much that they put towards spending quality time and quantity time as well with me has just developed into a really great relationship that I have with my family. And I hope that you will see that as well. But if you don't, that's okay. You can totally pick a different option for your children. And even if you do see some of the impact and you're like, you know what, I still don't want to do this, that's totally fine. Everyone can make their own decisions, but I do hope that this has helped enlighten you, and maybe if nothing else, that it gave you some confirmation of this choice that you've decided to choose for your children. I hope you drop a comment down below. Let me know if you were homeschooled or public schooled. Maybe we can add to that spreadsheet. I mean, you could always drop down the number of kids that you desire. If you drop down how many kids you want and what you were, whether it was public schooled, private schooled, or homeschooled growing up, that'd be cool. I will add it to the chart and add it to the statistical sample. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it.